Right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of the Northern Planning Committee. My name is Councillor Mark Owen. I'm the Vice Chairman of this committee. I will be chairing the meeting today as the Chairman is currently unavailable and he sends his apologies. First of all, we'll start with housekeeping. We're not expecting a fire drill, I'm reliably informed. So if the fire alarm goes off, then if we can take the fire exit at the back and congregate at the front of the building, please. I'm obliged to inform you that this meeting is being live streamed. And I've just been told that it is in fact live, so that's fine. And it's been recorded with that live stream. But I also ask you to please ensure that all mobile phones are switched off and ensure the volume on a laptop is muted, please. To ensure the members of this committee and all points raised by the public speakers are properly heard, I must advise you that I will not tolerate any disruptive behaviour. This is a meeting held in public, not a public meeting. And if such behaviour takes place and persists, I will then have to adjourn the meeting. Members should ensure that they are present throughout the meeting, as you can't vote on an item if you have not heard all the discussion. And can members and officers introduce themselves each time before they speak, so those listening know who's actually speaking. I shall now ask members of the committee and officers to introduce themselves. Should we start?
So Councillor Brendan Mullen, substituting for Councillor Brian Evans.
Councillor Carl Rowley, St Martin's Division.
Councillor Sam Wormsley, substituting for Councillor Rosie Radford.
Councillor Andy Davis, St Oswald's.
Councillor Gregory Ebbs, Whitchurch South.
Councillor Caroline Bagnall, substituting for Councillor Rosemary Dartnell.
I'm Emily Marshall, Committee Officer.
James Felton, Solicitor, Shropshire Council.
Already introduced myself, but Councillor Mark Owen, Oswestry South East.
Charlotte Morrison, Planning and Development Services Manager.
Kelvin Hall, Principal Planning Officer.
Ollie Thomas, Principal Planning Officer.
Gemma Lawley, Developing Highways Manager.
Councillor Gary Groves, Wen Rural.
Councillor Ed Potter, Shropshire Councillor for Lowton.
Thank you very much indeed. We'll now move into apologies for absence. I've got on paper that we've received them from Councillor Adam Pfeiffer, Rosie Radford, Julian Dean, the Chair, and Councillor Rosemary Dartnell. The substitutes for Rosie Radford, Sam Walmsley, and for Rosemary Dartnell, Councillor Caroline Bagnall. In that case, we'll move on to the minutes of the last meeting. They've all been presumably read. Does there anyone want to move that they be accepted?
I'll move they're accepted.
They're accepted. And seconded, Andy Davis and Greg Ebbs. Moving that to a vote, is everyone happy that they are accepted as such? Moving on rapidly then, we're on to public questions. I've got that there are no public questions as such. In which case we go on to item 4, the disclosable pecuniary interests. Is there anyone to declare such? This is going nice and quickly. In which case we then get on to the main meat of the meeting. Item 5 is the proposed residential development land to the west and south of Cedars Drive, Shrewsbury, which is the erection of 38 dwellings, including associated works and landscapes. Can I ask the officer concerned to introduce it for us, please?
Thank you, Chair. Ollie Thomas, Principal Planning Officer, presenting this one. Application site is outlined in red. It's to the northwest of Shrewsbury, just outside of the current development boundary. Members visited the site today, so I won't go through these, but photographs of access points and various. I should start by saying, in addition to the additional reps schedule that was sent out last night, we have had 3 further objections from residents raising traffic and highway concerns along Cedars Drive and Ellesmere Road, the loss of greenfield site and impact upon the environment and ecology through loss of trees. That is obviously in addition to all of the public reps which are written into the report. On screen is the proposed block plan showing the 38 100% affordable dwellings. Accommodation schedule is in the top right. We can see we've got a good mix there, ranging from flats to bungalows to semi-detached properties, all ranging from single story to 2-story. The little key on the bottom right, I don't know if you can make that out, but that says the parking. Parking will be provided at a rate of 1 space for the 1-bed flats, 2 spaces for the 2-bed dwellings, and also 3-bed dwellings, and then 3 spaces for 4-bed dwellings. Beneath that is the cycle storage amount. We've got 1 space per 1-bed flats, 2 spaces per 2-bed dwellings, and 3 spaces each for 3 and 4-bed dwellings. The site is arranged so access is provided off Cedars Drive to the east. That will lead on to a central estate road with new dwellings spanning either side, leading down into an area of public open space in the southwest corner. There's also an attenuation pond, which is the faint blue bit that you can see bottom here. There are some public connection points on the outer boundary of the site, and it looks like it's shaded in blue, but the land that will serve leads on to a former draft allocation of which we have a current application in for. So this site is trying to join up its open space and movement connectivity with the wider development of along Ellesmere Road. Here's just a typical house type plan. There's various different types of houses being provided, but as you can see, all fairly traditional in style, but adding some contemporary features through window treatment, half rendering, and I think also to point out is that the dwellings across the site have slight range differences in terms of their appearance, so it won't be a fully uniform site, which is in recognition to the immediate surroundings where there is a range of style and form of properties. So yeah, you've got the floor plans along the top and elevations at the bottom. Again, this is just a range of, this is just a selection of some of the house types being provided. Drainage has been quite a concern raised by a number of the residents, so I thought I'd pull out the surface and foul water drainage plans and the flood routing plans that's been provided as part of the application. Within the site and serving the proposed residential properties, there is obviously a network of surface and foul water drainage, which will be running under the internal access roads and within the plots. That will accommodate the foul water will feed into the pumping station, which is down on the southern boundary, and then the surface water will feed into a network of pipes which leads into the suds features over on the southwest. So at ground level, we've got the attenuation pond, but then also below ground is attenuation crates. So the suds strategy has been considered by our drainage engineer as acceptable and able to accommodate anticipated surface flows. Surface water, foul water is connecting into main sewers. Utility companies will need to provide connections into those and be dealt with through building reg stage. On the right hand side is the flood routing plan. So this flood routing plan has factored in the 1 in 100 year flood event, and it clearly shows that, you know, the internal access road acts as a channel in which to direct flood water away from properties and into the area of public open space and attenuation. The main issues really through this one are, I think from a policy perspective, we're obviously in a 5-year housing land supply issue where we can't demonstrate sufficient supply. So the tilted balance is engaged in terms of new residential accommodation. The site is 100% affordable, so it's an exception scheme under our planning policy. We allow exception schemes on the edge of existing settlements. This site is directly adjacent to the development boundary for Shrewsbury, Shrewsbury being our major focus for new growth within the plan period and beyond. All consultees raised no objection. Some of the consultees did raise some queries which have been addressed through the negotiation and determination stage, and it's therefore officer's recommendation that the application is approved subject to conditions and a section 106 legal agreement to secure necessary highway improvements, including public transport improvements, and also to ensure that the affordable dwellings remain affordable in perpetuity. I would just like to clarify on the developer contributions point. There was a question raised on the site visit in terms of community infrastructure levy. Just to confirm, affordable housing is exempt from community infrastructure levy, so there would be no charge on that basis. Thank you.
That takes us into a section of the meeting for public speakers. Now, I've got 3 in front of me for this application. The first one who will be speaking against, and it's a Mr. Robert Mitchell. Miss Mitchell, if you'd like to take the chair there. And when you're ready, I don't know if you've done this before, but the microphone in front of you, if you press the right-hand button, it should go red, and then people can hear you.
I'm Robert Mitchell. I'm a retired architect and resident of Ellesmere Road since 1981. Over 50 local objectors have provided comprehensive and thorough comments via the planning portal. However, these observations from the public appear to have been largely ignored by the applicant, the consultees, and our planning department. But I trust the committee will consider these in their deliberations. The planning application was, and continues to be, riddled with inaccuracies, errors, and potential untruths. Some illustrations. 1. The planning and design statement, including the statement of community involvement, to the best of our knowledge, never happened. 2. This is a full planning application, yet nearly half the drawings are still recorded as preliminary. What is actually being approved? The assessments of local public transport, pedestrian and cycle routes are inaccurate. The pedestrian access to the northwest public open space is accessed over a private drive and into the adjoining field, which is currently being considered for outline planning for 450 houses. The latest AIA report, updated in July 2025, still refers to the residential development of 44 houses. I could go on, but this very poorly considered and presented scheme. My distinct impression is that this submission has been completed as a remote, speculative desktop study with little or no acknowledgement of the site specifically or Shrewsbury in general, and a lack of any empathy with the community from this developer. The major issues, I believe, are access, drainage, public open space, and associated infrastructure. 1. Cedars Drive, constructed to 1960s standards, as those will have seen this morning, is totally inappropriate for access to this proposal. 2. Claiming that 74 cars are going to have no significant impact is hard to comprehend. 3. It is a challenging, staggering junction to Cedars Drive, Ellesmere Road and Beechwood Drive. 4. Selective use of crash map is not an accurate reflection of the actual conditions on Ellesmere Road. 5. These junctions onto the ever busier Ellesmere Road, we believe, are now extremely dangerous and totally unsuitable to take any further development. All the developments earmarked for this area were subject to the construction of the Northwest Relief Road. So what now? Flooding is well documented in the public comments, despite all the reassurances from the numerous consultants, it is clear that this situation deteriorated since the ongoing developments.
Mr. Mitchell, can I just to draw your attention to the fact that you've had 3 minutes?
Right.
Can you wind it up very quickly, please?
I will round up very.
Thanks.
I've touched on the drainage, but the infrastructure in the broadest sense of the word is not in place to accommodate these ongoing developments. At the very least, this totally unsatisfactory, inappropriate application must be deferred for further consideration or in reality rejected. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. The next public speaker I have is the local member for this area, Councillor Ben Jeffcott. Just a reminder, you have 5 minutes. Thanks.
Thanks. Is that live? Yeah, I think it is. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. There are 3 main planning reasons why I and so many local residents have objected to this scheme. Mr. Mitchell has outlined some of them. Obviously, there are some good things about it. We know that there is a need for affordable housing and there are increased housing targets which all councils have to meet. But that doesn't mean that we should set aside other considerations, which I believe this application does. 38 extra dwellings, approximately 80 extra cars using a very restricted access onto Ellesmere Road. If you look to the left, leaving Cedars Drive, the Ellesmere Road bends not very far away, so it is almost a blind corner. There have been accidents with traffic heading south. If you look to the right, there is almost no sight line to the right, observing traffic heading up Ellesmere Road northwards. It is really tight, and I don't see how that can be ameliorated by any infrastructure changes. There is a figure of £10,000 that's been mentioned. I can't see what that can achieve. The road, as the member of the public said, was designed some years ago. It was designed to service a cul-de-sac with 15 properties, not an estate with 100 cars. Public open space has also been mentioned. The applicants admit, in effect, they are double counting the drainage and suds works at the southern end as public open space, and state that, as the officers just repeated, that somehow the neighbouring potential future planning application can be taken into account. I really would caution that is not the right way to go. The landscaping access and insurances are compromised by the fact that a large number of significant trees were cut down in recent history along the south side of the site. The most serious concern, in my view, is the wider flooding and drainage situation, which residents have had to put up with over the last 25 years without any answer by Shropshire Council as to why this is happening. The groundwater in and around the drainage pond to the south of the Red Road development is much higher than 2 decades ago, as photographs taken by Pat Jones, who's sitting here, clearly demonstrates. I would urge you to look at the sketch map she has provided. I think that's been in the late representations folder. I think it's been added. If not, I've emailed it to you, which shows both the Cedars Drive site, the Juniper Road development by Red Row, the Penson Way development by Lovell, and also the site next to the drainage pond by Mara Homes, which hasn't yet been constructed, it's got permission, it's going to go ahead. It's blocks of flats, one of which will actually be built on stilts on top of the drainage pond, which is unexpectedly high. The drainage pond has got to the point where residents in the terraced houses on Ellesmere Road to the south of the site, which you can't see on any of the maps which the council has provided, but which are there, you would have driven past them. The cellars in residents' houses are underwater for months of the year at a time. And Mrs. Jones couldn't access her car in her garage for 5 months. None of this was predicted. None of this has been explained by this council or its professional representatives in recent years, yet more and more developments keep being approved. When are we going to stop this process? We as councillors have to represent the wider public interest. I'm a new councillor. Most of you are new councillors from different parties, but the reason why there's such a big change in May, because the public who put us here are not happy with the way things have been done up to now. And that just not just mean the wider service delivery, it means decisions about planning. This council cannot keep taking each planning decision in isolation from other planning decisions. We have to look at the impact as a whole. What is the wider effect on the environment and the community? The government is setting us ambitious targets, and we do need more affordable houses. But this scheme, this desktop exercise, Mr. Mitchell, I believe accurately says, is not the way this council should proceed. Accordingly, I urge you to reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. The third speaker is Mr. Luke Webb, and is acting as the agent, I believe. You have 3 minutes, Mr. Webb.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Luke Webb, and I'm the Planning Director for Living Space Housing. The scheme presented to you this afternoon is for 38 affordable homes. These homes are to be built to NDSS design standards, with 95% of them meeting M42 accessibility standards and the remaining 5% meeting M43 fully adaptable accessibility standards. There is a range of properties proposed, including 1s, 2s, 3s and 4-bedroom homes with 2 bungalows located at the site entrance to relate positively to the local context and surrounding residential properties. Cohesive placemaking is proposed through the pedestrian links into the wider site allocations open space. Along with this, a high quality landscaping scheme will be delivered, including an on-site local area of play. There will also be the provision of EV charging points and air source heat pumps to all homes. The application has been brought forward further to the principle of development for a 100% affordable housing scheme, having been deemed acceptable by officers through pre-app advice. A scheme for 44 homes was previously proposed. However, this was considered to be too many, and it was felt that other design improvements could be made. Working closely with the officers, a number of positive amendments have been made, including the number of homes upon the site has been reduced from 44 to 38. Further pedestrian connectivity has been incorporated into the design, with a dog walking loop provided around the balancing pond and an onward point of connection into the draft allocation site SHR 173. Garden sizes have been increased to meet and in many instances exceed council standards. Increased tree planting has been included along the streets and within the public realm. A greater proportion of parking has been positioned to the side of plots where appropriate, and the local area of play has been introduced. Living Space have partnered with Housing Plus Group Housing Association to deliver this scheme, and therefore will be well placed to start on site by the end of the year should planning be granted. Living Space will deliver its 500th home this year, having previously partnered with a number of housing associations to deliver inclusive new communities. Living Space are a medium-sized home builder, SME home builder, with a passion for delivering high-quality, affordable homes. I would therefore politely request that you follow the officer's recommendation of approval subject to conditions and 106 agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. Now, before I open this to debate, could I bring in the officer to answer any particular points he may have picked up?
I don't have anything particular I want to come back on unless members have anything. No.
In which case, it is open for debate. Do I have a first speaker? Councillor Mallon.
So, because it's 100% affordable housing, there's no sill. However, it has been identified that local school and GP provision is oversubscribed, kind of endemic around the area anyway. What mitigation for that is proposed here? Added to that, because of the potential cancellation of North West Relief Road, without that local provision, as I'm seeing in other areas, you're adding to road usage around northern Shrewsbury or coming back down Ellesmere Road into Shrewsbury. So how has that been taken into the wider planning?
Okay, so the comments from our learning and skills team, yes, they suggest that any education need should come through SIL, but because it is exempt, it would have been worked into the SIL policy that where affordable housing is provided, that it doesn't stack up viability wise to be able to deliver developer contributions. So the framing of the SIL policy would have factored that into account when setting the applicable rates. It's a standard policy within our SIL strategy that 100% affordable is exempt. Well, affordable housing full stop is exempt, sorry.
Do you probably looking at it, it's probably getting away from the specifics of this development, so it might not be appropriate for this discussion, and I am new around here, but where are we seeing the metrics for new development of the infrastructure we're talking about to cope with the wider development of the town?
Yeah,
I apologise, but it is pertinent to this now that we've come across the issue of no SIL.
Yeah, I get the point you're trying to make, but I think with it being an exception scheme, we have to take into account viability issues. They're not running a viability argument, but we don't charge SIL on these types of planning applications because it would open up viability arguments. So where essentially the SIL strategy would have factored in that affordable housing isn't liable, so that the rates applied to those developments which are liable would counteract any affordable housing that is provided outside of the SIL schedule. So the education need for this immediate area will be picked up by surrounding developments that are still liable.
Okay, thanks.
The point on the Northwest Relief Road, I think, would be for Gemma.
So yeah, Gemma Lawley, Developing Highways. So in terms of Northwest Relief Road and Ellesmere Road itself, there is a sensitivity with regard to development taking place on Ellesmere Road. The proposed allocation to the north for the 450 dwellings, that was one of the guidelines set on that, was that it was only to come forward once Northwest Relief Road was open to traffic effectively. So there's a couple of kind of considerations when it comes to this development. It was assumed that Northwest Relief Road, it was be acceptable without Northwest Relief Road coming forward. So part of the consideration from a highways point of view was to do with the affordable housing element of it and its likely kind of impact on Ellesmere Road. The other consideration from our point of view was that I don't know if you're familiar, but we had a development at Hencott for a care facility, and at that point we raised a highway objection on the basis that Northwest Relief Road hadn't come forward. That subsequently went to appeal, and we withdrew our objection on highway grounds because it was felt that it couldn't be sustained. So on balance, when we look at this site and its likely impact we look at the morning and afternoon peak, and in terms of kind of vehicle movements, then based on the kind of analysis, it will only have 13 trips in the morning and 16 in the afternoon peak, that we've made an assessment that effectively Ellesmere Road can accommodate this development without Northwest Relief Road coming forward. So happy to take any further questions if you've got them.
No, thank you for that.
I now have Councillor Andy Davis.
Referring to learning and skills, they state that this development is going to require additional school places. States quite where these school places are going to take place. Where are they going? The green fields, according to reports, oversubscribed. There aren't many of the local primary schools around. Where are these additional children going to be going?
That wouldn't be a matter for this application to decide, because the affordable housing is still exempt, so we can't get an education contribution towards that. So if there are needs for more school places, that would have to come through the wider SIL charging schedule, within which sits outside of the local planning authority decision-making process. there is a SIL infrastructure list, the new school places would need to be put onto that infrastructure list, but that's not a decision we can do as part of this item.
Yeah. I'm just concerned that, there's very few primary schools in that part of town. Greenfields is generally the only one. So it's sort of potentially 50, 60 more children coming through. It's where are these children going to go into primary school? Where are they going to feed into secondary school? Has this been taken into consideration?
I can only reiterate my previous answer, I'm afraid, on that one. The school places will have to come through the SIL infrastructure list.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Ebbs and then Councillor Walmsley and then Councillor Rowley. Sorry. Councillor Ebbs.
Good evening. So with regards to access to the estate, I notice Highways have raised no objection to the granting consent for the above mentioned planning application. However, the suggested Highways contributions for pedestrian and cycle improvements, I don't see any mention to access coming onto the main road. Can Highways just clarify if there's any work being done to improve access for the new housing plots onto the main road?
There are no proposals for any localised improvements to Cedars Drive. The carriageway width at the moment is 5 metres and our sort of minimum kind of standard up until recently was 4.8, so it exceeds that, and the footway provision on both sides is 1.8 up to 2 metres. So on that basis, we considered it acceptable from the type, the growth of the Cedars Drive, and haven't been seeking any improvements to the junction or access at all.
Councillor Walmsley.
I'm new to the councillor role, and I'm realising that sitting on planning committees is one of the most challenging parts of it, because we inevitably get the most controversial applications coming in front of us, and it's very easy to end up in a situation where you want to vote one way, but always in the back of my mind is that if we vote in a way that is not compliant with assessment against the relevant legislation, we, in the long run, are unlikely to achieve what we wanted and may well land the council with a big legal bill. And I think it's really important that we understand objections from the public and whether they are material. We've heard lots about drainage and highways, and I think those have been well answered by officers being assessed, and we can say they are compliant with relevant rules. There was some that were raised by Mr. Mitchell around accuracy of documents, so drawings being marked as preliminary, whether a community consultation happened, and public access that may be across actually a private drive. Could the officers just confirm if any of those are material considerations that we can consider when voting?
Yes. So whether an applicant engages with the local community ahead of submitting a planning application, we can't insist on. It would be, it's within their interest. We can't say it has to do it, and we can't take that into consideration as to whether it's a not material consideration, that one. The access across a private drive, again, that would be a civil matter. It would be up for the developer to ensure that they can actually access the site to both construct it and then sell it as occupied plots. The legitimacy of documents, I mean, that is certainly material to how we look at a planning application. We have to take submission documents on face value until we find out otherwise. But we don't just rely on submission documents alone. We consult with a whole host of internal, external consultees, which then stuff comes to light through the planning process, and then if it requires it, we would then further explore it before making our recommendation. I think in terms of the plans saying preliminary, that's not uncommon for planning application, because planning application is a very early stage in the design of a site prior to getting actually a spade in the ground. So what you'd expect is post-planning, those preliminary would then turn to building regs, plans, and so on. So the fact it says preliminary doesn't make any difference to us, because we will have a set of approved plans on our decision notice, and that is what we're granting consent for if members choose to go with officer recommendation. I think that was all of them.
Okay. Councillor Rowley.
Thanks very much. I've got a couple of points just to make that I picked up from a member of the public, which I wanted some clarification on. Firstly, the entrance and exit into Cedars Drive, focusing more towards the bend. Have the correct visibility spades in place for that? Are we getting enough visibility towards that bend to come out of that junction?
So in terms of the assessments, then we'd look at the fact that it's an existing access and we're satisfied that there's sufficient visibility for vehicles emerging. The other consideration is the forward visibility as well. So if you're travelling along Ellesmere Road, you can see a vehicle waiting, then the expectation is that you're sort of anticipating that as well. And Ellesmere Road at that location does benefit from sufficient forward visibility based on a 30-mile-an-hour zone as well.
Thank you. I have two different questions. Is that okay? Thank you. We picked up wider flooding issues, and obviously being on site today, we got to have a look at those problems. Obviously, I'm aware that there's a flooding problem to the north of the site, but I believe the site is high enough to not be a problem to that. But I wanted to kind of know, there's a bit concerned that the public, member of the public has raised these concerns, and I kind of wanted to know where those flooding issues were in respect to the plan, because obviously we've got the relief pool to the bottom, I can see that, and from what I can understand, the flooding issues are to the south of the site. I just wonder if we can get some confirmation on that.
They are, yes. There's no fluvial flood zone across the site. It's in flood zone 1, which, you know, is not an issue and not a concern in terms of probability of flooding. The pool, which is being referred to in a number of the objection comments, is actually within the flood zone. So we expect that to flood. The flood zone extends from the south up towards the pool. So if there is flooding, you know, if objections are raised citing concerns of flooding from the pool and southwards, that would be what we would expect, because that is within the flood zone. But this application site, there's no flood zone across it. They've submitted the sustainable drainage strategy would look at surface flooding, and that has then guided them into their SUD strategy that's on the screen.
And just one final point. I tend to ask you questions together. It's easier, isn't it? There's mention of a desktop exercise. Can you just give us the sort of like material aspect of that? You know, is it something we can think about or not?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because a lot of the technical reports and surveys we require at planning are desktop based. You know, there's only a handful which are intrusive on site. Those would be contamination, and we saw a gas vent on our site visit, so it's clear that they have done intrusive site visits and investigations. You know, a lot of the initial surveys and technical reports we need for a planning application start as a desktop study, because you need to understand what site constraints you're working with. It's only then, you know, on the findings of those desktop studies, do they then recommend whether any investigative site visits are required. So it's not uncommon to have a desktop appraisal across a number of the surveys and technical issues we consider.
Thanks.
Councillor Potter. Brilliant. Thanks very much, Chair. I just want to check with the highways around 4.1.12 around the parking spaces. We raised no objections to the proposed layout, but there was some advice around the parking in plots 1, 2, 21 and 24 to prevent on-street parking, particularly around plots 1 and 2. Is this something that's been taken into consideration as the development has been has progressed? Because we always know that when there's not enough parking provision, or the parking provision isn't right, it causes long-term problems within the community. And then I've got a final point after that, so I don't know if you want to address that one first.
Yeah, so in relation to the parking, we'd always try and encourage the applicant to maximise the parking. And from my highways perspective, that plot 1 and plot 2 at the entrance to the site, so the preference would have been that there would be an increase in parking spaces there. But I think on balance, they are affordable. I think from memory, they are the one bed bungalows, aren't they? So I think, you know, the one parking space is acceptable, but we would have always tried, and that was where the comment came from, really, that we'd always try and encourage.
I think particularly with bungalows, if you have elderly people who might have visitors or require perhaps care later on in life, a second parking space would be beneficial in those areas. But on balance, just from my sort of perspective of the whole application, we don't have a 5-year land supply. I read one of the public comments that said, well, perhaps we shouldn't be approving any planning applications without an up-to-date local plan. But unfortunately, that isn't the case. There is a need to provide houses, affordable homes particularly. Nothing I've heard today, although concerns have been raised by the local community and probably valid concerns within their own area, but from the consultees' responses, particularly around highways, from the SUDS consultee, there is little in here that I can see to object to that, and I would be happy to make a proposal to accept officers' recommendations according to with delegated responsibility for the Section 106 agreement.
Councillor
Councillor
Groves. I'll second that proposition.
It's seconded by Councillor Groves. Are there any amendments to that before we continue? No.
Just a point of clarity on my Councillor Potter, that is including the additional condition in the late reps.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. There's no other amendment to that. Presume take that to the vote. Yeah. Yeah.
I'll go through the chair.
Oh right. Okay. Yeah. Certainly. Thank you.
Sorry to jump in, Chair.
No. Thank you for the help.
Just a point of clarification. I do have a list of members in attendance here. I'll call out your names, and if you can just indicate whether you're voting for, against, or abstaining on this vote. First up is Councillor Andy Davis. Councillor Greg Ebbs. Councillor Brendan Mullins.
Abstain.
Councillor Gary Groves.
For.
Yourself, Chair.
For.
Councillor Ed Potter.
For.
Councillor Sam Walmsley.
For.
Councillor Carl Rowley.
For.
Councillor Caroline Bagnall.
For.
Thank you, Chair. So that's 8 for, 9 against, and 1 abstention. Therefore, the application's valid.
The motion is carried. For the members of the public, if you are staying for that particular application, if you wish to leave, I'll have a short pause to allow you to do so. If you're staying for the next one, then that's fine. Thank you all very much indeed. If we can then move on to item 6, which is the land west of Lyth Hill Road, based in Earl Shrewsbury. This is the hybrid planning application seeking full planning permission for the creation of 114 dwellings, open space and infrastructure with access from Lyth Hill Road, and outline planning permission for 4 self-build plots as well. If I can ask the officer to introduce it.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Kelvin Hall, Principal Planning Officer. Before I start the presentation, I just wanted to just run through the additional letters that we've received on the application since the report was published
and I'm assuming that members have had the opportunity to read through these already. We've got a comment in from West Mercia Police, who have made recommendations on the application. We've had additional public representations which have picked up on the comments that have been included in the report already. We have had representations about the consultation period, which I'll speak about shortly, and we've had a comment in from the Baston Hill Parish Council as well. I just wanted to raise a matter in relation to the ownership of the site, which is on page 3 of the additional representations about the ownership of part of the site being with the diocese, and therefore it's recommended if members resolve to grant planning permission that there's an additional clause within the section 106 agreement that requires that that land is retained for drainage purposes in perpetuity. We've also had an additional comment in from our highways team as well. The comments have mainly been addressed in terms of the proposed conditions and recommended conditions and the 106 agreement obligations, but this includes additional information about the walking audit as well. Going back to the matter in relation to the consultation period, prior to the committee report being published, we consulted with Active Travel England, and we gave them the standard 3 weeks to respond to the consultation. They have now responded, and those comments are within the report and summarised there. The website was then updated to incorporate that 3 week period. That 3 week period wasn't it was expiring on the 26th of August. It wasn't intended that that date related to an additional public consultation period. We haven't gone out formally for additional public comments, given that there haven't been any substantive additional comments made or submitted in relation to the application. Therefore, it's unfortunate that that date was the 26th. However, it doesn't relate to the public consultation period. There is no reason to defer the application on that basis. Moving on then to the presentation. The site is shown in red on this plan. You can see how it fits in with the existing extent of Baston Hill Village and the wider countryside to the south, including the public rights of way in dashed purple. Lyth Hill Road is shown in yellow to the east of the site, from which the site will be accessed. Next plan shows the topography of the land, and members visited the site this morning and were are aware of the topography and the slope of the land and its relationship to surrounding properties. This is the proposed site plan, and again, members, this was explained to members today. The purple land is the land for the proposed self-build dwellings, which is part of the outline application, and then you can see the proposed road layout and the primary and secondary routes and the cul-de-sacs and how they fit into the open space and drainage infrastructure around the site. These are the some examples houses being put forward. This is a 2-bed house. This Amberley is a 3-bed house. Harrogate is a 4-bed house. This is a 5-bed house at Hampstead, and then there are this is a one-bedded block of units, and then there are bungalows as well, 4 bungalows on site, 1 unit of 3 and one single unit, which are proposed on the northern eastern side of the site. This is the proposed parking plan, which shows the proposed parking areas for individual houses and some visitor parking as well. And this is the public open space, which shows how the open space will fit in around the houses and the drainage infrastructure in blue, and the path network as well to link those up and provide connectivity to the surrounding land. We identified on site this morning that there'll be a number of trees removed, and they're shown in red on this particular plan. In the main, though, the existing vegetation will be retained around the periphery of the site and through the central part of the site, with additional landscaping being proposed, which is shown on this plan here. So in terms of the application itself, I don't want to add much to the conclusion which is in the report. The application was proposed as a draft allocation in the draft local plan, which is being withdrawn. We are giving the evidence supporting that draft local plan material weight in the determination of applications. You'll see that there are no technical objections from consultees to the application, and we acknowledge that there are 480 plus objections from the local community, and the report sets out how those particular concerns have been addressed through the redesign of the site and also through planning conditions and additional obligations within the Section 106 agreement. It's acknowledged that the proposal is contrary to the adopted development plan. However, there are matters of sufficient weight being put forward as part of the application, such that officers are able to recommend that planning permission is granted subject to conditions and to the 106 agreement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Gilbert. Right, as before, we're going to go into a period with public speakers. I've got 3 down. The first one is the Councillor Rob Rusco for Basin Hill Parish Council, who will speak against the application. Councillor, I'll remind you, you've got 3 minutes.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Committee. Basin Hill to date, within the current local plan, has had planning permission granted for 95 houses, an increase of 35 over the higher limit set in the current local plan. This application would increase this figure to 149. The committee report you have sets out our objections, so we will not repeat these. Page 37 raises the point made by paragraph 11D of the National Planning Policy Framework, which requires the decision maker to apply less weight to policies in the adopted development plan and more weight to the presumption in favour of sustainable development as a significant material consideration. Tilted balance. There is case law that confirms that tilted balance is not a green light for approval. Where adverse impacts significantly and demonstrably outweigh benefits, refusal remains justified. We believe there is adverse impact here that outweighs the benefits. Shropshire Council will have to consult again on allocated sites for the new local plan, so it is not, in our opinion, correct to assume that this would be an allocated site in the new local plan. We do not consider that Basin Hill is a sustainable location in that the primary school is full, the medical practice is under significant pressure, car parking for the shops and for the library is at a premium. We do not have a regular bus service for this proposed development. Public rights of way demonstrated in the travel plan cannot be assumed fit for use all year round, and the walking distance from the development to the shops is way in excess of the maximum that should be permitted. 2.3 hectares of best and most versatile agricultural land will be lost if this development proceeds. This is a significant proportion of land and should not be sacrificed for this development. We do not believe that this development is in keeping with the local distinctiveness of the area. The actual density of the development is more than 36% greater than for Basin Hill as a whole. As regards traffic, section 4113, page 46 of the committee report talks about introducing localised parking restrictions along Lyth Hill Road. We do not believe that it is fair or right to remove this amenity for the residents of Lyth Hill Road to overcome a problem highlighted for this development. And finally, it concerns us that several significant conditions will have to be included in a Section 106 agreement, which suggests that the application is not fit for purpose. Any 106 agreement will be open to amendments and would need to be monitored closely, which may prove difficult for a council with limited resources. Surely an application should be fit for purpose before it is approved, and not rely on a formal agreement to do this. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Next, we have the local member, Councillor Terry Trickett. Councillor, if I could remind you, you've got 5 minutes.
Chair, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I recognise that under National Planning Policy Framework, there is a presumption in favour of sustainable development. However, that presumption is not unconditional. The framework requires that decisions must take account of material considerations, and it is my submission that in this case, those considerations clearly outweigh the benefits of this proposal. These considerations include, firstly, the impact on character and appearance. The proposed development would erode the rural setting and harm the established character of the settlement. Without a robust and detailed landscaping scheme, there's no assurance that the development could be appropriately softened or integrated into its surroundings. This should not be a reserved matter in the full application. There would be a major adverse effect on the open pasture fields at year 1, which would continue into year 15, as planting would not alter the overall effect of the loss of the open pasture fields. The scheme before us is one of introduction of large red brick houses, many with ridge heights of 8.7 metres. To put that into perspective, the standard ridge height for a 2-storey house in the UK typically ranges from 5.5 to 7.6 metres. These houses are designed to be unnecessary incursions into the countryside of staggering heights. The proposed development would have significant harmful effect on the character and appearance of the area, contrary to CS6 and MD2. Not providing landscaping details and having unnecessarily high ridge heights are significant material considerations from a design perspective which go to the heart of this application. Second, accessibility and connectivity. Residents would be reliant on unlit public rights of way to reach the local services. This raises safety concerns, particularly during winter months, and undermines the claim that the site is sustainably located. True sustainability requires safe, inclusive and accessible routes to services, something this proposal fails to deliver. Third, environmental sustainability. The applicant proposes to deliver biodiversity net gain off-site. This directly conflicts with the environmental objective of sustainable development, which prioritises enhancements to the natural environment within the adjoining area or the developing area. Off-site delivery does not mitigate the immediate loss of habitat and diminishes the local community's direct environmental benefits. Fourth, the loss of best and most versatile agricultural land. The permanent loss of 2.3 hectares of BMV land is a significant harm. National policy is clear that such land should be protected where possible, given its role in food security and climate resilience. Once lost, it cannot be replaced. Fifth, highways and capacity. The A49 junction is already operating at or below, beyond capacity. Adding further traffic will only worsen congestion. No credible mitigation has been presented that would offset this impact. Since Redrow's 2022 transport assessment, a further 23 family homes have been built in this village. Finally, pressure on local services. The local school and GP practice are both at capacity. Oak Meadow School capacity is 420, Ofsted December 2024, number on roll 458. The Beaches Surgery hoped to relocate to the since withdrawn Cavell Centre on Otley Road based on the fact that their premises were no longer fit to deliver modern healthcare services and lacked space to meet future demand, with no realistic option to expand outwards or upwards. Currently has 7,000 patients. Roughly this site would result in 600 more. There are 4 part-time GPs and 1 locum. considered inadequate for the number of patients if we use government guidelines. So ask yourselves, how will this medical practice absorb so many more patients? If its physical premises are inadequate, how will SIL address this? Where is the additional land to build a new practice? Where will patients go if they cannot access the village surgery? How will they get there? Taken together, these are not minor or isolated harms. They go to the heart of the 3 pillars of sustainable development. Economic, compromised by congestion and loss of productive agricultural land. Social, undermined by inadequate access to services and unsafe routes. Environmental, weakened by off-site biodiversity net gain and the erosion of local character. When the material considerations are weighed in the balance, the adverse impacts of this proposal would significantly and demonstratively outweigh the benefits. I therefore respectfully urge the committee to defer this application with an extended consultation to fully address all of these considerations or refuse it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. The third speaker will be Jen Towers, agent, speaking for the application. And Ms. Towers, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to address Planning Committee this afternoon. The site provides a logical extension of Basin Hill and benefited from an allocation for around 100 homes in your now withdrawn draft local plan. The proposals before you include 114 homes and an area reserved for self-build for those interested in designing and building their own home. The development includes a balancing pond and swale, open space and landscaping and an area of play. We're proposing 28 affordable homes, which equates to just over 24% of the total number of homes Redrow would build. Your adopted policy on affordable housing sought 15%, and your draft local plan policy required 20%. Our offer is considered a significant material consideration in support of the application. Within that provision of affordable, 4 bungalows are proposed and 6 homes that will be built to M43 standards, and that's standards for wheelchair users, with features like a ground floor wet room, lower countertops in the kitchen, and importantly, space to install a lift should one be required. On top of this, nearly all of our homes meet the M42 standard, which is a home that facilitates wheelchair access and can be adapted for a wheelchair user. Your draft local plan policy requires 70% of all homes to be built to this standard. We have 86% of homes on site that meet this standard. The inclusion of bungalows and accessible and adaptable homes is considered, again, another significant material consideration in support of the proposals. The area of self-build can deliver 4 additional homes. Your draft policy encouraged the inclusion of this kind of provision of housing on sites to help meet the council's ever-growing self-build register. This again is considered another material consideration in favour of the application. We have sought to retain and enhance the existing tree-line hedgerow boundaries whilst introducing new areas of publicly accessible open space to complement the development and add biodiversity value. The development will be totally gas-free, with the traditional boiler replaced by an air source heat pump. EV chargers will be provided as standard too. I am aware of infrastructure and drainage related concerns raised by local councillors and members of the public. We have, however, demonstrated with officers that the site does not have any environmental nor technical constraints that would prevent it from coming forward. We have worked closely with your officers, including Highways and the local drainage authority, submitting comprehensive data to satisfy their needs and expectations, enabling the application to be brought here today. To confirm, there are no statutory objections outstanding on the proposals. Redrow has committed to pay for highway improvements in the local area and a passenger transport contributions, which will be secured through Section 106. SIL money to the value of around 1.6 million will be paid to the authority to fund infrastructure projects, and we will achieve 10% biodiversity net gain. This is sustainable development with many benefits, supported by your officers, and approving this application today will help the council to meet its housing land supply shortfall. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Towers. I shall now go back to the officer to find if there's any particular comments he wishes to make.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to pick up a couple of points that Councillor Trickett made in relation to, firstly, in relation to landscaping. There is a comprehensive landscaping scheme that has been submitted. There is also a condition which we're recommending that that requires the submission of a comprehensive landscaping scheme to be based upon the one that we've had, and the reason for that is that to enable officers to look at the landscaping scheme, given that there have been some minor changes made over the last month or so, as a catch-all to make sure that all of that is being dealt with. But there is certainly a comprehensive landscaping scheme that we have looked at already. And the second point was in relation to biodiversity net gain. There's a legal requirement that all developments do provide 10% biodiversity net gain, and that can be on site and that can be off site. On this particular development, it does not provide the 10% biodiversity net gain on site. However, it does provide a significant amount of gain in terms of hedgerow development of 13%. The biodiversity net gain will be provided off-site, but it will still be providing the statutory 10%, which is required under the Environment Act. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelvin. I have Councillor Potter.
Thank you very much. It won't be surprised to officers who have served on planning committees before about my interest is in the agricultural land classification. I note in the report that an outline application in 2017 was refused on this basis. I wonder, because the officer's report stated the overall this weighs against the economic benefit. I appreciate the 5-year land supply situation, but what has changed since 2017 to 2025, when we had an application that was refused based on this principle, compared to now? Is it purely a land supply issue matter, or is it something else?
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's the basis of it. A lot has changed over the last few years, and the report that's with you today does acknowledge that the loss of that agricultural land, which is best and most versatile, is a negative element of the proposal. However, we, in terms of making a decision, we have to weigh up, don't we, the negatives and the positives, and the difference is that that balancing exercise has changed significantly over the last few years, in particular over the last few months, given the changes to the housing supply requirements and the draft local plan situation. So it's just we're not saying that issue has gone away. We're just saying that now it is outweighed by other more pressing competing demands for housing development.
If I may just come back on that, I sort of appreciate and understand that, and I think I still think it's an important consideration. I think as time has moved on from 2017, I think the importance of food security is something we should consider give more weight to, and I think that should be considered, and that's something we should consider as an application. The other thing I just want to draw attention to is the density of what appears to be this application. It seems, in comparison to the rest of the village, really quite a high density. I think one of the speakers said 36% higher densities than the rest of Basin Hill, which I think is a really negative impact, particularly with losing the best and most versatile land, 40%. And the thing I wasn't overly keen on is this biodiversity net gain off-site. It's something which concerns me about this application. In comparison to the application we just looked at, this density is, in the previous item on the agenda, this density seems significantly higher, and I don't think would provide anywhere near the character of the existing village in the same way. So I think, unfortunately, this application isn't as attractive, even considering our 5-year land supply issues, and I think it could be really more thought out than what has been presented.
Yes.
Thank you for those comments. I acknowledge the comments about density. If you look at the adjacent houses, conversely, you would say that they are quite low density. as well. And the contrast perhaps is the issue here. And here we're talking about a new development. It's physically a continuation of the existing development. However, it's a new development with a new access, and we're looking at on an aerial view here in terms of whether that particular density is appropriate. The draft allocation was for 100 houses, 114 has been put forward, but also we've got additional open space as well. So there are kind of lots of open space over and above the policy expectations. That's just a matter of fact. And so there are balances that we have to make in terms of what is an appropriate density.
I've got 3 speakers coming up for Councillor Andy Davis.
I'll come back into education again. I think it's significant here. There's a lot of additional houses. There's a lot of additional children. It mentions in the report we're looking at primary and secondary provision. That does concern me. The density application just clearly on there to me seems out of character for the current situation of Basin Hill. On the site visit, I was concerned regarding the access, moving the access so many metres, and it's directly opposite someone else's driveway. So that concerns me as well. On the local infrastructure, you know, we are struggling with schools, we are struggling with the GP practices, the capacity, the village. Having that's some more additional people. It's going to put more demands on those facilities within Basin Hill at the moment. So that does worry me as well in this application.
Thank you, Councillor. I have 3 others. Councillor Walmsley. I've got Councillor Walmsley, Rowley and Ebbs in that order. So Councillor Walmsley, please.
This is a really difficult application. I dare say common sense says that these shouldn't get built. There's been some very coherent objections put forward, but I'm well aware that we are assessing against legal requirements, and we have an applicant whose legal team will look at any decision that's made, and it seems very likely will challenge if they believe we've failed to comply with the relevant rules. And with that in mind, my biggest concern is actually around traffic. So practical experience says that the junction onto the A49 from Lyth Hill Road is problematic and potentially dangerous. And the traffic survey that's being used to support this application is now over 3 years old. In that time, the bus cancellation, the bus service that's referred to in the transport report has been cancelled, adding to pressure on the road. Councillor Trickett mentioned that 23 new homes had been built, again adding to pressure on the road, and we're aware that there is a lack of local services, which means if capacity in local services, which means that these houses were built, people would have to use their cars to get to schools, GP, surgeries and other essential facilities. So with all that in mind, I don't see how we can make sensible decisions around the impact on the road based on a survey that's over 3 years old when lots of things have changed since. And I'm very wary of approving an application when I can see that we're going to add to existing problems and potentially cause accidents on a busy road.
Councillor Rowley.
Yeah, I agree with the comments already from Councillor Potter and Councillor Walmsley. I'm not wholly against the application. I think, you know, a lot of villages in Shropshire, you know, we're seeing the same thing, and there is a demand for housing where we need to have houses built. But again, when I look at this application and I look at the immediate housing around it, the density for me is just all wrong. I'm just looking at a map now, and I'm just like, it's just something not right about it. You know, that is a great location, but there's just too many houses in that one area for me at the moment, and in comparison to the houses around it. And then when we talk about local infrastructure, there are problems. We're seeing problems. I'm really concerned about the comments they made around surgery. That is quite a big concern for me. So at the moment, I just kind of put my point as I'm struggling a little bit.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ebbs.
So Thank you very much for everybody who spoke. I'm in agreement with many of my fellow councillors with regards to the sustainability of the development. A couple of points to note from the report there. So at the moment, we are 567 dwellings short of required 10,469 with a 5-year land supply. So although the tilted balance is obviously in favour of new housing, it is noted by officers that the amount which we are short by is not of a number which, let's say, 2,000 houses would obviously have a lot more weight when it comes to new housing developments. In addition, I do think it's important to note that obviously with regarding sustainable development with NPPF, we should take note on building on countryside. And although there is a demand for housing, the demand for housing should be sustainable, and that demand for housing is not that great if the demand is 567 homes as opposed to 10,000 homes. So something which my fellow councillors should take into account. A question for the officers, which is the consultation period has not lapsed, and yet we are making a determination on this decision. Can officers just clarify why the consultation period is still ongoing?
Thank you, Councillor. As I tried to explain earlier, the consultation period has lapsed effectively. We consulted with Active Travel England a couple of weeks ago, and the standard period for consultation with consultees is 3 weeks. They have now responded to that consultation, so effectively we have their comments. They've been included in the report and been taken account of. The only issue with the apparent issue with the consultation dates is that our website got updated to show that the expiry of that 3 weeks took us to the 26th of August, but that was only for Active Travel England. There wasn't a wider consultation with anybody else. It was only for Active Travel England. Unfortunately, our website doesn't account for that limited consultation that we did. So there's no legal reason why we can't make a decision today.
But from a council perspective, it doesn't look very good for us if we start determining decisions despite the website saying that the consultation period is still ongoing. It's not good practice for a council to make those determined. Obviously, this is not a planning concern, but I would just sort of note that it's something which is worth mentioning. If we are to make a determination, decision should be after the consultation period. Even if there's not a legal practicality, there is a certain moral practicality, I think, which should be mentioned.
Can I bring in our legal person to try and help us?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, just as a point of clarification in relation to your point, Councillor, any resolution that's made today is subject to the completion of a Section 106 agreement. Based on considerable experience of such agreements, that will not be completed within a week. So effectively, it will probably be next month, possibly the month after, before that agreement's completed, and only then will the planning permission be issued. So it won't be issued today. So effectively, that date will have long since gone by the time the planning permission is issued, subject to a positive resolution today. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry.
Just a little bit more clarification. So I think the problem with the semantics is it wasn't public consultation that was reopened. It was a specialist consultation that was reopened. So the public consultation, we would only reconsult the public where there's been a significant change. We obviously, the public time for comment is at the beginning of the process, so we can then work on the matters that the public have raised in accordance with the NPPF. You know, we're here to work with the developer to facilitate the development.
Thank you. Councillor?
Thank you. Can I just quickly revisit the density issue? I know Basin Hill quite well, and the houses adjacent to the proposal are not really typical of most of the housing I'm aware of in Basin Hill. So in terms of that ratio of footprint and spacing, how does it compare to all Basin Hill property? Is there a comparable zone or development within Basin Hill that would be broadly comparable to this one? Because, you know, on the face of it, to the untrained eye, with an uncalibrated Google Maps in front of me, it doesn't look commensurate with the rest, but I could be wrong. But have you got that analysis?
Thank you. I don't have those figures. I think the issue with density, though, is that we're looking at a proposed development of 114 houses next to a low density area of residential development. And the question should be, in what way does that matter? In terms of looking at the density, you've got to look at whether it's an acceptable appearance, not whether or not that density fits in, because otherwise, how would you get to a point of providing a development which is a draft allocation for 100 houses at the same density as the houses next door? You wouldn't do that. So you're looking at a plan that shows low density, high density. If you're in that development, that proposal now, in what way would that matter to you when you're walking along the streets of this new development?
Because you're living in Basin Hill. And if you look at the village overall, as with any sort of, it's quite a big urban development, nearly 6,000 people live there. It's a village that's grown arms and legs over the years with new developments being added to it. And generally speaking, with any development like that, same as Shrewsbury, you get the more dense development in town where people are walking distance to the central hub, the school, the shops, all the rest of it. And then people further out, more towards the countryside fringes of the village, they tend to have the bigger houses, the bigger gardens, and that's the way it tends to more or less go. And then all of a sudden you've got this massive ramp up in density. The people who will be now furthest away from the community, we've discussed already, walking distance to the school, walking distance to beaches, surgery, particularly if you're not feeling too well. A development there, perhaps, but a development that's so intense and then displaced, particularly as you can't go straight into the village, you have to go out onto Lyth Hill Road, stake your way around all the rest of it. Again, walking distance was brought up earlier, I won't repeat that. It's quite jarring looking. I'm not an urban planner, but to me, as somebody who used to live very close there, yeah, it just seems to be inappropriate to the location, reference to the rest of the village.
Right, I have two councillors, Walmsley and then Rowley.
Microphone's still on. So it's a question about procedure, really. I've raised concerns about the validity of the transport assessment that's in front of us because it's several years old. Do we have an option of asking for additional time so that an up-to-date transport assessment can be produced?
Apologies, I was just kind of waiting for my moment, really, to be honest with you. So, if it's in direct kind of response to the matters that you raised, obviously from a highways point of view, there are a number of matters, but I'll try and sort of keep to specific points, but I'm happy to take any further questions. So I think on your original kind of comments, you related to made reference to the A49 junction. So originally, as part of the submission, there were some improvements to the A49 junction that were proposed. From Shropshire Council's local highway authority perspective, we were supportive of that, and National Highways were at the time. It was then re-evaluated by their engineering team, and the decision sort of came back through formal comments that National Highways no longer required those improvements to be made, so they were withdrawn as part of the proposals. From our point of view, whilst Lyth Hill Road is our network, the primary network really is under National Highways, so without their support, then we were accepting of that position, really. I think the second point that you'd made was about the bus service and the withdrawal of the service that was assumed during the thing. This site now actually forms part of Zone 1 for the on-demand responsive. So as part of the Section 106, the applicant is willing to make a contribution. So the expectation would be that it would contribute to the on-demand service that's already covered by this area. And then I think on your final point, really, with regard to the ATC, that it was because his application has been sort of ongoing for some time, and the discussions, the original surveys were in 2020 and then they were updated in 2022. From our point of view, they were done in June, which is a neutral month, and we would kind of consider that you know, those figures would be valid. In terms of the assessments that they undertake, they look at what they call like a tricks database. So they look at different sites and look at how many vehicle movements is likely to be generated by it. They've also looked at, I think there was reference within Councillor Trickett's comments about the applications that have come forward during that period. So in terms of the committee developments and the transport assessment, it's taken into account that those 23 dwellings, and it's taken it into making an assessment about it. And then it also applies what we call a growth factor in terms of the build out and what it's likely to look like. So from a highway perspective, we're satisfied that the surveys that were undertaken remain valid and that the transport assessment was robust in that respect.
Thank you. Councillor Rowley.
It's a question when it comes to sort of like procedure and stuff. It's becoming quite obvious that many of the councillors are concerned about the density of this application, and I'm kind of asking, do we have to object based on that, or could we defer based on the density?
We are dealing with the application as it is and with the density as it is. I appreciate your points about density. We are advised under the MPPF to ensure that applications are an efficient use of land, and that will obviously entail a level of density. The lower density would be argued to not be an efficient use of land. The benefits of a higher density site is, of course, it's providing more housing, which is also the government thrust policy as well in terms of boosting the supply of housing. So this is where the questions arise, not just purely simply looking at the density of a development, but whether or not it fits in with other policies as well.
Yeah, I want to agree with you, and I do understand, where there is that housing need and making the best use of this land. I think where the problem is because Biston Hill is a village, and that's where I'm really struggling, because it's just not right for the village. Is where I am really. If this application was less housing, I think most of us would probably certainly go with it. It's just too many houses for that one area. Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor. I have Councillor Davis and then Councillor Ebbs. Councillor Davis.
I'm just looking at the CPRE sort of objection for it. They mentioned the BAT survey is outstanding. Has a BAT survey been completed yet? We mentioned sort of the effective use of land, but in their sort of report, they state it's high quality agricultural land, which to me, my mind is effective. They also highlighted, the demand on amenities, medical services, school services, which we've highlighted already. And the best service, which we're asking about today, transportation from site down into the village. There's various sort of just a request best service, which I think is quite demanding as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ebbs.
I've no reason to doubt the figures that have been put forward by Biston Hill Parish Council.
We are.
Speaker.
but those are figures which are in the adopted development plan. We're moving now towards a situation because of the 5-year housing land supply issue and the requirement to provide new houses over and above the adopted development plan, where those matters in the MPPF and paragraph 11D have greater weight in decision making. It is contrary to the development plan, this particular application. We haven't acknowledged that. However, we have to give weight to the current national planning policy situation and the lack of our supply figures, which weren't accounted for when the core strategy and the SAMDET plan were adopted. But at that time, we were looking at what we thought we needed going forwards. Now we're in a different planning policy situation where we need more houses than were proposed when the core strategy and SAMDET got adopted. So we're not doubting that those are the figures that Basin Hill has taken more housing than was set out in the adopted plan. But the goalposts are now moving in terms of what we do now have to provide.
Shall I summarise a little bit where I see we're at, and then perhaps someone might make a recommendation? I did the last one. So I see Basin Hill as a village, and this is on the rural edge of the village. I see it as high density in comparison to much of Basin Hill and an urbanisation of what the village, I think, would consider itself to be a village and not part of the greater Shrewsbury area. I see that there's concerns raised around highways, particularly with the A49 Lyth Hill Junction. The fact that this was refused in 2017 on the basis of the best and most versatile land, I appreciate I don't have a 5-year land supply, but from what I'm hearing from other members, that's a shortfall of 567. When we're talking about giving weight and judgment, we've got to strike a balance here. When other sites come forward in Shrewsbury that don't have that quality of land, that don't have the density issues and the urbanisation of what is a rural village, that's where I'm leaning, and that's where I see potentially legitimate reasons, material reasons for objection could be made. I don't know whether the rest of the committee would agree with that and want to formulate that into a.
Thank you, Councillor. I have 2 speakers, Councillor Rowley and Councillor Evans.
Councillor Riley. So listening to what Ed said, I'm just looking at it again, density too high, village character at risk and infrastructure overloaded. I propose that we object this planning application.
Thank you, Councillor. Do you have a seconder?
Yes.
If I bring Jolly in for some procedural matters, please.
Charlotte Morrison, I think it's the first time I've spoken, isn't it? Development Services Manager. So, yeah, I think I can see where committee are. I think it's really important from my point of view that I let you know that we have a notice of intention to appeal from the developer. That's right, isn't it? So a deferment would result in an appeal against non-determination, which means we therefore don't get to issue a decision on this, notwithstanding the committee resolution. I also have concerns about the defensibility and costs of an appeal. So I would say if members are minded to refuse for some of the reasons outlined, even having listened to officers and taking the advice in the report, then I would say the decision, from my point of view, I would make that decision deferred rather than a refusal in order for us to come back to planning committee. However, members should be aware that we probably won't get the opportunity to come back to planning committee because in the meantime, we have a notice of intention to appeal, which is standard business practice. It's not, to be read as threatening in any way. It's just, they've been waiting a really long time for this decision. The application's been in since 2024. We're here to make decisions about development. So that would be what I would say to members when making the decision.
Councillor Rowley, do you want to modify your?
Leave that for a minute. I'm just trying to think.
Leave it as you're having to think it. Yeah. Councillor Walmsley.
So just more information on the benefits of deferring rather than a vote to refuse the application at this point. So are we saying that we know that the applicant will appeal if we defer? Why is that preferable to them appealing because we've refused?
It would be me invoking my power to defer the application rather than letting the decision to refuse stand, and that would be on the basis that I, having taken account of everything that's in that policy, and I understand what members are saying, but on the strong advice of officers, we don't think this is defensible at appeal. I do think that everything, when taken into the balance, and I can see what members are saying about density, and I can see all the other points, but weighted in the balance, my view would be that we shouldn't move to refuse this. We can move to defer to return to another planning committee. That doesn't then delegate any further decision to me, but that would be me saying no, I wouldn't. I would move to defer rather than which I can do.
Councillor Rowley.
Yeah, so I understand the proposal to defer. Where I'm a little bit concerned, I just feel as a planning committee at the moment, and I don't know if my colleagues feel this as well, is I feel that our decision making is kind of been taken away from us. Because it looks like we're all on the same sort of page. It really does feel like as a committee, we're all on the same page. And after then making that a proposal for objection, then we get thrown in the objection, what you were saying about the appeal, which is a concern. Which then, when it brings in costs, then that brings you into then potentially override our decision. Now, I would be more than happy to change the proposal to defer based on that density of housing being lowered. I'd be more, I'd be happy with that. Because that's what it generally comes down to. A lot of it is what we talked about. Is it's just too many houses for that area. So I would make that. I'd be happy to make that proposal, but at the moment, I just feel my power has just been taken away. I'd like to see what Ed's got to say about this.
I've actually got two other speakers. However, Councillor Ebbs, you were seconding that. Are you happy for that too?
Yes, I'm more happy. Second.
Okay, that's fine. I've got Councillor Mallon and Councillor Potter.
So on this standard business practice of having a pre-packaged appeal, as it were, the sort of Damocles over any application, then surely we are always under the jeopardy of being taken through an expensive appeals process. Therefore, we can't reject. And again, getting back to what Councillor Rowley says, that takes away our agency as a committee to, without fear or favour, exercise our judgment on any application. So I'm actually quite discomforted by this, because I'm correct in saying another question. With density being one of a number of concerns we've got here, would we have an amended proposal or plan brought back, or is it just a kicking the can down the road to get the same proposal put before us?
Yeah, it is difficult. So I'm not overriding you. What I am saying is I understand, and actually, the issues around density, urbanisation, really, really sensible. So it's not that you can defer it. And you can defer it for us to come back and do some more work and provide further explanation, speak to the developer about density. You know, the developer is here, they will take away from committee what they take away from committee. However, they have a business decision to make, whether their options, because of where we are in terms of the time, they can just move straight to appeal if that's what they want to do. Officers will go back to the developer and say, these are conversations that the committee have had, and we can try and address some of those issues, but I can't guarantee you will then get to make a decision next time we come back to committee, because the appeal might already be in process. And that's just, you know, if you want us to go back to the developer and say, this is how committee feel, and I certainly feel as though it isn't entirely an objection in principle. It's an objection to what you've got in front of you in terms of urbanising impact because of the density. That's how I understand the conversation. So we can look to work with the developer to try and resolve some of those issues. If committee want to defer, I would counsel quite strongly against a refusal. But I have to tell you that it is up to the developer whether they exercise their right of appeal or not. I can't stop them from doing so, and that's a business decision for them. But obviously, as officers, we can put your concerns to them.
Before I continue, do you want to come in? You said
certainly, Chair. Yeah. Thank you. And it's just following on from the development manager's comments, really, in relation to this application, and it's just to endorse those comments to you, and so that you're fully aware of all the facts relating to this application. It is a matter for the applicant if they appeal the council for non-determination if this application is deferred. It would have been remiss of us as officers not to have informed you of that fact, because if members' expectations were that this application were to come back to the next committee or possibly the one after that, and then it wasn't on the agenda, and then it was suddenly discovered that an appeal had been made, there would have been some frustration, understandably so, and quite rightly, questions asked of officers. Hence, Charles has brought that to your attention. The other thing I would say is, and fully understanding and noting the concerns of members about the decision-making process, in this instance, and certainly in my career, only on a handful of occasions have I seen officers intervene in this manner. It's not a decision that we take lightly, and it's not one that we particularly wish to do. However, cost, the likely resource implications of an appeal / public inquiry for reasons that we would have difficulty defending in a public inquiry compel us to do so. There's no desire to go over members' heads, take their decision-making power away from them. We just think it's important that you're fully aware of all the facts relating to this application and the potential consequences that may flow. I do endorse the advice given to you by Charlotte. I do agree with it, and I think I'll leave it there, members, if I may. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Feldman. Can I just remind members that the current proposal is to defer, and it's been seconded. I've got two speakers, Councillor Potter and then Councillor Davis. Councillor Potter.
I fully understand the risks and limitations. I've been around long enough to have been there and done that and lost various appeals myself. I understand the appeal process for non-determination could take some time. I'd like to think that perhaps if we did defer, perhaps on density, and the developer, who's a well-known developer, might work with us here, hearing the concerns of local residents, hearing concerns of committee members around density, because I think mention of a site was for about 100 homes. We're 114. Is that right? Does that include the 6 self-builds? Four self-builds. Does 114 include the 4 self-builds?
The 100 was never intended to be a definitive number.
Okay.
It was an indication as to what the scale might be.
So it could have been 86.
Could have been 86. Could have been 150. You know, it's what when it comes down to the detailed design, that site can accommodate.
So what I'm saying is a deferment on density. If the developer wanted to work with us to have a quick turnaround, we could have this back to committee pretty sharpish if officers were prepared to work with the developer and developer work with officers around density to address some of the concerns that as committee have, as local residents have. You know, we know the position we find ourselves in, but that isn't to say that we've become toothless. You know, these are genuine concerns, I think, around the urbanisation of what is a rural village. 36% in density increase over the rest of the village is not insignificant. That's more than a third. So I would potentially support, I'm minded to support a deferral on that grounds if we could work with the developer, and hopefully they would work with the council to perhaps turn that around quickly, look at the layout, you know, look at the open space. We've been here before in terms of usable open space. That is a big block of density in one lump there, and perhaps see if there's something that could be done to come back to committee pretty sharpish for a decision. That would be my my thinking.
Thank you, Councillor. I have a question. What exactly is constituted by density?
I'm not a planner though. We're councillors, we're local members. I think in density, in terms of the number of if you look at the plan, look at that block there. That is a significant, what I would term as an urbanised development in comparison to a village setting.
If I can assist.
Can you? Yeah, it would be helpful for officers perhaps to assist on the wording of that.
Presumably, we're talking about height, pitch.
High pitch, yeah, we've heard about the height. Space around dwellings.
There are other things such as roofscape, skyscape.
Yeah, there's no green corridors through that. The open space is very much on the periphery. It doesn't have a village feel to it, as you would perhaps expect. You know, I hope those things are helpful. You can. Yeah, anything else officers want to help me out with the technical side of things? I'm always willing to listen and learn.
Well, I think what we're in here is a deferral situation. Yeah. So really, this is a conversation for the developer to perhaps, well, they can either decide to appeal or they can decide to listen to this conversation, see how members feel. So we haven't, I haven't now got to go and phrase that, or Calvin, I should say, taking credit. I haven't now got to go and phrase that into a reason of refusal.
If we look at some of the developments that have been to this committee, you know, you look at the movement, the access through the green corridors, the layout, the style, the height, the pitch. You know, I think there is something there that could work to be perhaps more satisfactory. I don't think we're ever going to please everyone. You know, I'm well aware of that, but I think there is something that could happen quite swiftly, quite quickly, to get a positive outcome on all sides.
Thank you. Before I go back to Councillor Rowley to sum up, I've got Councillor Davis.
Yeah, we talked about a learning curve, and we are on this learning curve. As you've been doing it for many years. I'm fairly new. But we've spent a lot of time going through his reports. I've read almost 500 sort of public opinions about this. We've been out to the site today to do a site visit. We've had, I think, a reflective and honest conversation around the table. We've made a judgment, and I'm now very confused why. I understand what you said, but the judgment we're perhaps going to make, we're now not able to. I'll leave it at that comment.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rowley, do you want to?
Yeah, I think at the end of this meeting, could possibly have a discussion about how the meeting went. But also, I'm happy to defer with the agreement that the developer will speak to the residents and potentially speak to the planners and this committee on what.
Just phrasing, Councillor, we can't force the developer to talk to us, but. So if I can try and phrase it for you, defer to allow officers to negotiate, to open negotiations with the developer with a view to resolving the matters raised in committee. That's enough for a deferment, yeah, I believe.
I would.
Solicitor.
Yeah, can we defer with the the requirement that it does come back to planning committee. I know what you said about the appeal.
Oh no, it absolutely 100% will come back to committee if the developer doesn't appeal. If the developer appeals, it's then in the hands of the Secretary of State, not in the hands of Shropshire Council. The other option is we might bring it back to say, members, you didn't make a decision on this. However, we will ask members of the committee effectively to say, members, what decision would you have made, given the new information you've got in front of you, what decision would you have made, and we will then use that to inform the appeal. Is that okay?
Sorry, is it going to be quick, Councillor Davis, because it's effectively being summed up and we need to go to a vote? Is that all right? You sure? All right.
From my perspective, if I have to go back to the applicant and discuss your concerns, it'd be useful for me to know exactly what I'm discussing, because Councillor Rowe, you talked about density in terms of impact of the number of houses and the impact on services. That's a completely different question to impact, which Councillor Potter is talking about, which is the urbanisation and appearance of a development in terms of.
I think we're talking about all of the above. It's all part of the same piece. We don't need to decouple them. They work together.
We have enough information for the office to actually deal with that, so I'm going to move to the vote, please. The proposal is that we defer. Are we going through by names or?
Same process.
Same process then.
John, just for clarity, as I'm a new member, if we vote for the deferment, I understand that. If we vote against the deferment, what are we voting for?
You'd have to have another proposal.
So you would have to put a proposal in for rejection.
No, I'm still not. Sorry.
So you either go then to accept the actual recommendations, or you go to refuse. But the actual substantive motion at the moment is to defer. So I leave that in your hands as to. So you've got to go somewhere after that.
So if I just agree to defer, what am I actually agreeing to?
Not to defer. Someone. To accept or to refuse.
So you would have to put a proposal saying no.
So reject this one.
Just giving you a couple of seconds to get your head around it, and then we'll move forward. Yeah.
Shall we deal with the proposal we have on the table?
Let's, rather than discuss this any further, members, can we just go through the proposal as it stands at the moment, please? So the proposal is to defer, and if we can go around the table voting.
Thank you, Chair. Again, same procedure. If you could just indicate whether you're for, against or abstaining in respect of the proposal to defer consideration of this application. Councillor Andy Davis.
Abstain.
Councillor Greg Ebbs.
For.
Councillor Brendan Mullins.
Against.
Councillor Gary Groves.
Against.
Yourself, Chair.
I'll go for.
Councillor Potter.
For.
Councillor Sam Walmsley.
For.
Councillor Carl Rowley.
For.
And Councillor Caroline Bagnall, please.
For.
Thank you, Chair. So that's 6 for, 2 against, 1 abstention, therefore deferred.
Right. Therefore, your question then is moot because of the result of the vote. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you very much indeed. That concludes item 6. We're about to go into the wonderful section of appeals and appeal decisions. If any members of the public wish to have a rest and leave and not hear these parts, please do so. I'll give you a minute or so before we carry on. Right, members, on to item 7, the appeals and appeal decisions. We have a list of a number. Rather than go through them individually, which would take quite a bit of time, is there any particular one that members want to make a comment on? No? Do I have somebody then to move that we accept the appeals?
It's just information.
Oh, it's just information. That's fine. Another learning point for me. Thank you very much indeed. So that item is noted. And we're on to the date of the next meeting, which is down as Tuesday, the 16th of September. No, I think we'll have a rest until then. So, and with that, I close the meeting. Thank you very much indeed.